Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you listened to my story. Please give me a follow and like the video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment and provide feedback so I can improve the sound quality. Yes, we invite you to listen to part 6 of the series. Chapter 57, 53. Reaping the Net, 2. Chapter 57, 53. Reaping the Net, 2. The armored python was soon blasted into pieces. The soldiers in the imperial capital were dumbfounded. Previously, there were only nearly 100 frost giants, and they had almost broken through the western city gate. Now, there were so many giants in front of him. They began to tremble. They could only draw their bows and arrows, but no one dared to attack. At this moment, they remembered the prince. At this moment, the mobs who were preparing to attack the city gate finally regained their memories. They finally remembered who had repelled these giants. If not for the 7th prince, would the imperial city have been able to hold? Could they survive? How could they shout, "The 7th prince is cruel and heartless, disobeying the imperial edict, and, so what if the 9th princess is kind?" Xia Ji walked to the corpse of the man in black and pulled out his halberd. Huang Jing's body instantly shriveled up a little because his blood essence had been completely absorbed by the demonic halberd. Thump. Thump thump. Xia Ji held the black halberd in his hand and felt the strange, fetal movement. It was as if there was a heartbeat hidden in the metal body of the demon halberd. The heartbeat was curiously imitating his heartbeat. This made him feel a wonderful sense of unity. It also made him feel the impulse of the demon halberd. It was the impulse to crawl out of the darkness and try its best to open its eyes and see the world. When Xia Xiaosu heard about the battle outside the city, she led the 3 uninjured fox palace maids up to the city wall. The moment she saw the city guard, she did not say anything and one of the palace maids directly cut off the traitor's head. The princess walked to the edge of the battlement and watched the battle in the distance. It was the battle between King Kong and the giant python. However, the giant python was constantly being consumed, but it could not even break through King Kong's armor. Although it seemed like they were evenly matched, the higher they stood, the clearer they could see. It was only a matter of time before the 50,000 Great Shang soldiers were defeated by the 3,000 frost giants. No matter how hard Nangong He and Deng Gongjiu tried, it was useless. One after another, huge footprints suddenly appeared on the snow-covered ground below the imperial city. The city guards looked at the strange footprints and before they could react, they felt the city wall shake. The few soldiers standing in front lost their balance and fell off the city wall due to the huge shock. The brazier also fell down. Lu Huo was blown into the sky by the strong wind. In the fire, the appearance of a few frost giants was immediately revealed. In the snowstorm, their ability to hide their tracks was extremely strong. Unknowingly, they had already reached the city gate. The soldiers guarding the city shouted in horror, "Giant attack! Defend the city!" This shout stunned all the soldiers and the rioters below the city. They felt their blood freeze as if they had fallen into an ice cave. These soldiers had been discussing earlier that the defense of the imperial city was mostly due to the contributions of the soldiers who had died, and the 7th prince was just a lead. It was really laughable for him to be so arrogant. These soldiers had been thinking of doing their jobs. As long as someone came to charge through the city gates, they would not stop them too much. But now, they were all panicking. The east and south gates were attacked by the giants at the same time. In the city, on the city walls, all kinds of panicked voices sounded. "The giants are here. Defend. Quick, quick, quick. What about large-scale siege weapons? Why didn't you move it up the city wall? Didn't you say that you wanted to open the city gates? Why don't we open the city gates and welcome General Deng and General Nangong into the city to defend the city together? Where's the 7th prince? Quickly invite the 7th prince to battle." At this moment, in a large residence in the imperial capital, the nobles were panicking. The city gate hasn't opened yet. Huang Jing has failed. He is dead. What? The frost giants are attacking. Why are these damned alien races attacking again? Didn't they get beaten back once? Damn it. Damn it. Lord Wang, this is all your fault. If not for you. Enough. How can you blame me? If you had. Gentlemen, what should we do? This time, there is no retreat route that the Emperor has arranged for us. Escape from the West Gate. After you escape, go south. I'm very familiar with that area. Feeling the earth shaking and the flames of war flying, as if the city was about to fall, this group of hidden nobles finally felt true fear. Last time, it was within their expectations, but this time, it was unexpected. In other words, this time, he would really die. Grand Scholar, make a decision. He Wenfeng was still calm. He tapped his fingers on the table and glanced at the group of dignitaries in front of him. He suddenly clapped his hands, and 200 axemen rushed in from outside the door. Dozens of axemen guarded the door and windows, and the rest rushed directly to the dignitaries. Then, without wasting any time, they raised their hands and slashed down. In the midst of confusion and cursing, the room was filled with blood. Not long after, those nobles fell into a pool of blood, leaving only one person with a calm expression standing. The axeman walked past him but did not attack him. He Wenfeng looked at the men and smiled. Lord Wen, a mob can conspire with you but not with you. They can share happiness, but they can't share hardship. You should understand, right? The secret passage leads to the East Gate. The East Gate is already sealed. I lied to them about the secret passage, the Grand Scholar said with a smile. The real secret passage leads to the West. The men had a complicated expression and sighed heavily. The Grand Scholar said loudly, Lord Wen, there is no right or wrong in this world. There is no good or evil. Do you think I don't understand those principles? What was the point of saying human words to people, talking nonsense to ghosts, and lying through one's teeth? Wouldn't the winner be king and the loser be bandits? How many fools in this world would not use their cleverness and remain untainted? Since you're standing here, you must have the responsibility to continue walking. You're still young, and this old master was like you when I was young. Let's go, we don't have much time left, don't let this old master look down on you. After saying this, he clapped his hands again. Then, more than a dozen people walked out from the darkness. These people were all dressed in noble clothes. Their bodies were not much different from the dead nobles. Some of them even looked similar to him and Lord Wen. The Grand Scholar carefully looked at his colleagues lying on the ground and seriously carried out the last stab. After making sure that everyone was dead, he looked at the 200 axemen and said indifferently, follow the plan. I'm willing to die for you. The 200 axemen each rushed into a small room at the side, each taking kerosene, and then quietly sneaked out of the Grand Secretary's mansion. They walked towards the chaotic imperial city and began to set fire. Flames lit up. More chaos. Then, the dozen or so men of sacrifice dressed in noble clothes quietly walked out, pretending to escape, heading towards the North Gate. After doing all this, the mansion was dead silent. The Grand Scholar brought Lord Wen to the study room behind the screen. He pushed open the mechanism, and the bookshelves shifted, revealing a dark secret passage that led downwards. Just as the two of them were about to enter, the door of the study room suddenly opened, and giggles came from outside. Darren is really ruthless in doing things. He doesn't reveal a single drop of water. The Grand Scholar narrowed his eyes and turned his head. What entered his sight was a young girl with bare feet stepping on the threshold. The young girl was wrapped in a red silk dress and was 1.1 meters tall. She was looking at him charmingly. I have been looking for you for a long time, he he he. Chapter 58, 54. Test 1. Chapter 58, 54. Test 1. In front of the secret passage, the moment Lord Wen saw the girl, he had already reached out and grabbed the hilt of his sword. What are the chances of winning? The Grand Scholar asked softly. Lord Wen narrowed his eyes and stared at the girl who was only about 1.1 meters tall. He shook his head, indicating that he was not sure. This girl gave him a very terrifying feeling. The Grand Scholar didn't waste any time. He raised his hand and slapped at a mechanism on the wall. However, as soon as his hand moved, he felt his heart move. His eyes couldn't help but look at the girl in front of the threshold. With this look, the hand that was hitting at the mechanism stopped. Huxian Er's eyes were like silk as she asked, Sir, am I beautiful? The Grand Scholar's heart began to beat wildly, and his eyes were filled with confusion. He lost his mind and began to walk toward Huxian, uncontrollably. Patter, patter, patter. A gust of demonic wind suddenly blew, and the candles in the house were extinguished. Many black shadows appeared behind Hussein, and those black shadows exploded into black smoke. One of them had already pounced on the Grand Secretary. Lord Wen was Huang Jing's junior brother, and he was also born in the Taoist sect. How could he not understand the appearance of such a dense demonic aura? Demon, he roared. Sin. As he shouted, his right hand instantly released the hilt of his sword and quickly grabbed the back of the Grand Secretary. His left hand swiftly took out a piece of yellow paper from his waist and muttered something. The yellow paper instantly exploded and drowned out the two words, Imperial Decree, that appeared faintly at the top. It was a talisman. The talisman was stuck to the entrance of the secret passage. Lord Wen grabbed the Grand Scholar and ran into the secret passage. He also cultivated the 9-in heart technique, so he was extremely fast. Every step he took was a shadow, and his body was several meters away. However, when he moved, Hussein moved as well. She was even faster, and in an instant, she had already reached the secret passage. When she reached the entrance, golden light shone brightly, and the flames of the talisman turned into a white-robed figure. She held a long sword that could subdue demons and slashed at Hussein. Hussein suddenly turned her head 180 degrees. Her white fox face faced the front and let out a hoarse growl. The huge white fox image behind her flashed. The phantom image of the talisman immediately dissipated. The talisman burned up at the same time, leaving no ashes. Although she had been stopped for a moment, she had already entered the secret passage. Behind her, many fox children and fox grandchildren turned into black smoke and followed closely behind. However, there was actually a fork in the secret passage. This made Hussein stop and sniff carefully. However, it seemed that Lord Wen had dealt with it, and the human smell had actually disappeared. At this moment, a sound came from the left side of the road. Let go of me, I want a beauty, my beauty. The Grand Scholar had lost his mind. Saliva formed a line at the corner of his mouth as he shouted. Lord Wen was stunned and hurriedly pressed his acupoints before running forward. However, this voice had already revealed their location. Hussein smiled and shot out like lightning. The fox's shrill laughter rose and fell in the secret passage. Seventh Highness, please come out. Seventh Highness, please come out. Voices rose and fell. Thinking of the city guards who had opened the city gates, the mobs finally knew fear. They recalled who was the stabilizing force of the imperial city, who repelled the frost giants and gave them a chance to live. Elder brother. Can't you bear to? I'm worried that the city will be breached. Xia Ji waved his hand, and the princess leaned over. After hearing a few words, Xia Xiaosu was stunned. She then lowered her eyebrows and closed her eyes. She stood on the city that was about to be breached and did not say another word. Behind the two of them, flames soared into the sky. The city was in chaos. The fire, snow, and noise made the place seem like the edge of hell. The brother and sister stood at the edge, silently standing. There were many people running around in panic. People were dying all the time in the distance, and there were no more wails. After a while, Xia Xiaosu sighed softly. Xia Ji said softly, they always hope that someone will fend off disasters for them, but they are unwilling to show any kindness. When death comes, they will shout loudly, but they will always forget what they have done and said. Brother, they just want to live. They want to live a better life. And not everyone was like this. The hearts of the people were like the sea, and the highest were just filthy floating foam. These floating foam could not represent anyone. They were just the accumulation of evil virtue, but not everyone was like this. The people's hearts are not the loudest voices, but the silent majority. Brother, I believe. The people must not be foolish. How long have you been reading? 17 years. Xia Ji looked at the once miserable, small, and pale princess beside him. Her expression was now more determined. 17 years of budding, and now she was finally going to bloom in blood and fire. So, he praised softly, all right. Bang. Bang. The giant's siege was extremely fierce, and to these soldiers who were not prepared to defend the city, this kind of attack was extremely fatal. The city gate was smashed by the huge force, causing many dents. What followed was a loud bang. The city gate was broken. The giant charged into the city. The rioters who had been clamoring earlier ran away, but how could they outrun the giant? With just one wash, they were crushed into flesh and blood. The capital was in chaos. Xia Xiaosu couldn't help but glance at her brother. His elder brother remained calm and motionless. He looked into the distance. In the distance, the 50,000-strong army was being crushed by the main force of the frost giants, and their losses were extremely heavy. There were actually many howls that sounded like they were crying in the wind and snow behind them. Clearly, the Guifang army had followed them. Behind him, the shouts in the city grew louder and louder. It seemed that everyone was shouting, "Greetings, Seventh Prince." The voice was like thunder as it gathered from all directions. This legend with the title of Divine Marshal was their only hope. This time, the mark would be extremely deep, and they would never forget who had saved them. "Greetings, Seventh Prince." Xia Xiaosu turned her head to look. The fire in the city was like a candle, illuminating the kneeling figures in the distance. When people were in despair, what else could they do other than kneel and pray? Xia Ji looked into the distance quietly. "Little Su, call back the fox Death sworn to protect you." "Brother, I will take care of myself." The two of them looked at each other. Xia Ji's gaze had already shifted to the figure on the shoulder of a 10-meter-tall giant among the frost giants in the distance. In the snowstorm, although he couldn't see it clearly, he could recognize that it was the Queen of Guifang, Tu Luo. Although the two of them had an alliance, the frost giants had broken through the city and Guifang's soldiers had come. He was not naive enough to think that the Queen of Guifang was only here to help him. Moreover, Hu Xian had heard some other information when she sent the letter. He watched Tu Luo approach the city gate, getting closer and closer. Xia Ji grabbed the halberd, and a burst of energy exploded at the end of the halberd. The 9 suns shone brightly, and in an instant, the surroundings were as bright as day. The moment the halberd shot out, he was already standing on the body of the halberd. Like a great emperor riding a demonic dragon, he patrolled the land that was immersed in blood and fire. No matter who it was, no one would ignore this explosive brilliance because it was too dazzling. Tu Luo saw it too. The strong wind that blew against her face made her silver hair dance wildly behind her. Her blue eyes calmly looked at the prince who had aroused her great interest. He was so powerful, so majestic, and so domineering. She smiled. Seeing that her uncle was about to raise his hand to fight, she half knelt on the shoulder of the 10-meter-tall frost giant and said something softly. The frost giant stopped moving. The ice armor that was surrounded by the wind and snow was torn apart easily. The tip of the halberd was still shooting toward Tu Luo. However, Queen Guifang only smiled and stared at the prince who was flying over. The two of them looked at each other. In an instant, Xia Ji grabbed the halberd with his right hand and swung it to the side. The force on the halberd, the force he had accumulated, turned into a half-moon flame current that cut through the air, producing a thunderous explosion. He landed beside Tu Luo. "Seventh Highness, look. Our trust has withstood the test again, hasn't it?" Queen Guifang smiled. Chapter 59, 55. An unexpected ally. Chapter 59, 55. An unexpected ally. "Your Majesty, you owe me an explanation," Xia Ji said. Tu Luo's blue pupils moved, and he suddenly asked, "Shouldn't I have broken through the city?" Tu Luo was silent for a moment. "It wouldn't be good if I said it," Xia Ji said. "It seems that the messenger you sent is not simple," Tu Luo said with a smile. "He heard some information, right?" Xia Ji looked at her quietly. "It's nothing, actually," Tu Luo said generously. "It's just that I promised someone to sneak into the palace at the right time to meet you." "Who is he?" Xia Ji asked. "Your Highness, ever since I entered Great Shang, I have had 2 allies. You are the second and he is the first. Speaking of which, you must know him. Not only do you know him, but you are also very familiar with him. He is not your enemy." "Who is it?" "He is." Queen Guifang's voice grew softer and softer as she moved closer to her ear. When Xia Ji heard this name, his calm expression changed slightly. It was obvious that this name surprised him. He was silent for a moment, then said, "Let's finish the act first." "As you wish," said Tu Luo with a smile. At dawn the next day, the snow stopped. Golden light fell like a sword, enveloping the imperial city in blood and fire. Most of them were confused, but if they had to say something, they could roughly say. Nangonghe and Deng Gongjiu tried to break into the city at night. And then they clashed with the princes and princesses guarding the city. Guifang took advantage of the blizzard to attack and defeat the army outside the Great Shang city, breaking through the imperial city. The citizens of the city requested the seventh prince to fight against the enemy. In the end, the seventh prince really turned the tide and captured Queen Guifang in the midst of the chaos. Then, he single-handedly captured Nangonghe and Deng Gongjiu. Surprisingly, the two generals, Nangonghe and Deng Gongjiu, were convinced by the seventh prince's courage and led the remaining soldiers to submit to the seventh prince. This was simply a legendary battle record. Unfortunately, a frost giant was hiding in the city and ambushed the guards escorting Queen Guifang. As a result, Queen Guifang took advantage of the chaos to escape. Only a few people knew the truth. But was this important? It was not important. The winner takes all. The truth is always written by the winner. This was Xia Xiaosu's business. 3 days later. The sunny day turned into a light snow. The snow flew around the palaces and halls and landed in front of the library. In the twilight, the sound of a young girl reading came from the pavilion. Therefore, if you speak with the wise, you will understand. Talk to an unwise man, and you'll teach him, and it's hard to do. Therefore, there are many kinds of words, and things are changeable. Therefore, all day long speech does not lose its kind, and things will not be chaotic. LT does not change all day long, but does not lose its master. Therefore, wisdom is precious and not forgotten. Listening is valued in hearing, and words are valued in novelty. Xia Ji sat under the eaves outside the door and raised his glass to the snow. He took a sip to warm himself up. 3 days ago, the mastermind behind the riot in the city had been captured, and the foxes had directly seized the house. Thus, Scholar He and Lord Wen had already become one of their own. Perhaps they had many ambitions, many wisdom that had seen through life, and many unfulfilled wishes. However, the winner was king and the loser was a bandit. They could only be possessed. If he and Little Su had lost, who knew what the outcome would have been? 3 days ago, Nangonghe and Deng Gongjiu had also been taken away. At this moment, they were reorganizing the army, resting on the city walls, and going to the surrounding villages to distribute food and grain. As for the Deng family, Xia Ji didn't make a move. Deng Ju's granddaughter was still in the dark. Although she knew that her grandfather had killed himself, she didn't know that her father had been possessed. Her grandfather had killed himself because the Deng family had wronged His Highness. No one could be blamed for this. The foxes of the demon race controlled a few key characters. The ancestor of these foxes, Hu Xian Er, was Xia Ji's slave girl. On the other side, the demons invested in Little Su. And because he had not deliberately suppressed them, all the smart people who should have jumped and betrayed him had come out. Those who deserved to die had died, and those who should have been possessed had been possessed. In less than a month, most of the restless factors had been eliminated. All in all, he and Xia Xiaosu had already reached the pinnacle of control over the imperial city, to the point where it was impossible for them to betray it. The current situation couldn't be described as good or bad, but it was still a win. It could be expected that in the following period of time, the imperial city would mostly focus on recovery. And because of the elusive appearance of the Guifang frost giants, every place would enter a state of defense. Even if the emperor sent troops from the south, they would at most cross the river that divided the north and south, and would not go too deep. This winter was the time to completely control the imperial city. As for how much he could control it, that was another challenge. Xia Ji carved the prayer beads every day, then took out the skill orbs from the book. At the same time, he sorted the skill orbs into categories so that he could use them immediately when he wanted to. A new batch of little foxes from the monster clan had brought lava wood. Xia Ji used the lava wood to make the bead head of a prayer bead. The feeling of this strange wood was indeed different. It actually added a strange flame power to the prayer bead. Although it was very little, it was still a change. The sound of wheels rattling came from outside the door. Xia Ji looked up and saw a wooden wheelchair appear at the entrance of the arch. The person in the wheelchair was wearing a devil mask and was pushing the wheels with both hands. However, the pupils behind the mask were calm as if they were dead, hiding the hatred of looking up at the sky from the underworld. This was Queen Guifang's first ally. He was also the person who had been arranged to meet Xia Ji in the palace. Xia Ji swept his gaze across the room and noticed that the person below the waist had completely disappeared. The hands that were exposed outside his sleeves had been burnt by fire, making him look extremely ugly. The person glanced at the prince sitting under the eaves, then looked in the direction of the library. He closed his eyes and listened to the sound of reading inside. He could not help but let out a long sigh of relief. He looked at his surroundings. Everything was so familiar, but also strange. He took off the devil mask, revealing an ugly face that had been burned by fire. No one knew how he had survived, nor did anyone know how much pain he had suffered, or what kind of will he had to continue living like this. Xia Ji looked at him quietly. He looked at Xia Ji and said in a hoarse voice, "Xia Ji. Shweta, since you're here, have a cup of warm tea." The wheel turned to the side of the roof. Without any movement, the wheelchair had already floated in the air. Then, as if it was pushed by an invisible hand, it landed silently on the wooden corridor under the eaves. Xia Ji held a cup of liquor in his left hand and a cup of tea in his right. He poured a cup of tea and handed it to the evil spirit in the wheelchair. The evil spirit didn't refuse. He took the tea and drank it slowly. He couldn't drink it quickly because his body couldn't withstand eating or drinking too quickly. Neither of them said anything. They just quietly watched the snow cover. After a long time, the last ray of light also disappeared. Lights were lit in the library pavilion, and the sound of reading continued. The evil spirit in the wheelchair sighed. Xia Ji continued drinking, one glass after another. After a long time, the door opened. Xia Xiaosu went out and saw that there was still someone outside the door. She couldn't help but reveal a stunned expression. When she saw the terrifying face of the person, she couldn't help but be stunned. However, she didn't show any fear or disgust. "This is the Crown Prince," Xia Ji said softly. P.S. No matter how many people criticize, the author still firmly believes that there will be more silent people who will quietly accompany Xiao Shui. Thank you for your company and silence. Chapter 60, 56. Royal Secret, 1. Chapter 60, 56. Royal Secret, 1. No matter what, Xia Xiaosu couldn't connect this evil spirit with the Crown Prince. She still remembered the last time she saw the Crown Prince. Outside Shimen City, the Crown Prince was wearing golden armor and holding the nation-suppressing spear. He was tall and sturdy, and all the officials sent him off. His 100,000 troops were as steady as mountains. How high-spirited was that? However, when they met again, it had turned into such a miserable appearance. Moreover, everything below his waist was gone. How did he survive? The Crown Prince looked at the 9th princess and explained, "Obtained a divine technique and was imbued to the 9th level by the ancestral dragon, so my vitality is very strong." Why could the Crown Prince say these words so matter-of-factly, as if this was not a secret? "Your elder brother should know," the Crown Prince said. "You don't know?" The Crown Prince asked suspiciously. "I don't know," Xia Ji replied frankly. The Crown Prince said, "Xia Ji, you're indeed the one who hid the deepest among us brothers. You've obtained 3 great techniques from the ancestral dragon's immersion, the 9 Yang Heart Sutra, a powerful Buddhist defense technique, and a strange power. The ancestral dragon thinks highly of you. But even now, I've already become like this. Are you still unwilling to believe?" "The heavens have opened their eyes," the Crown Prince said, "and a calamity is about to arise. The ancestral dragon blessed the royal family. Destiny is the power of the world. Power is the time. At that time, heroes came forth in large numbers, and gods and devils danced in chaos. Therefore, every time the princes and princesses of our generation turn 16 or 17, they will dream of the ancestral dragon. The ancestral dragon will bless them and bestow divine power on them. They will soar to the 9th level. This is very inconceivable, but I confirmed with Xia Ji that she also received the ancestral dragon's blessing when she was 16. Xia Ji is my sister. She won't lie to me. As for the other sisters-in-law, I have also observed them. Although they are hiding it from each other, they should have all experienced this fortuitous encounter. Xia Xiaosu couldn't believe that she had spent so much time with a bunch of princes and princesses who pretended to be pigs every day. The fourth princess, Xia Ji, was so gentle and weak, charming, and even looked at herself by the lake. She was actually a great expert. She suddenly said, "Then brother." Xia Xiaosu looked at Xia Ji as she spoke. Xia Ji nodded and lied through his teeth, "Yes, I did dream of it. I'm almost 17. Will I be dreaming of the ancestral dragon soon?" Xia Xiaosu was delighted. However, she thought about it and suddenly said, "That's not right. If the emperor knew that brother had received enlightenment, why did he let brother stay here to guard the city? He's crazy." The crown prince said coldly. "I still don't understand why he wanted to harm me." "The emperor harmed you?" Xia Xiaosu asked in surprise. "How could he harm you? You've always been filial to him." She thought of the crown prince and the emperor. This pair of father and son used to be such a loving father and filial son. The emperor treated him completely different from her and her brother. The crown prince coughed violently. His body was too severely damaged to produce any violent emotional fluctuations. After a long time, he suppressed his emotions and spoke slowly. "The cultivation technique I obtained is powerful and focuses on recovery. In other words, on this battlefield, no matter how badly injured I am, I can recover. And the reason why I became like this wasn't because of the frost giant's sneak attack. My 100,000-strong army was not destroyed because of the frost giants. The Wolf Ceiling Pass is the strongest pass at the border. It's more than 100 feet high and there are 6 passes in front and back. No matter how incompetent I am, I can't lose this pass overnight. Moreover, I had carefully set up my defenses and had never been careless. I had even studied Guifang's history and culture. I had even placed the frost giant, which had never appeared before, on my guard. I set up braziers every 5 meters, and the heavy defensive equipment piled up at 6 levels of the checkpoint. Hundreds of scout teams scouted day and night, and my trusted generals took turns patrolling. It was impossible for me to not be able to defend. But someone assassinated an important general who followed me before Guifang launched a surprise attack. Then, he held me back during the siege of the frost giants and defeated me head-on. If he wasn't hiding in the camp, if he wasn't my trusted aide, I wouldn't have been able to get him. He thought I was dead, so he left. But he didn't expect me to crawl back from hell." Xia Xiaosu couldn't imagine the twists and turns of the process. It was also impossible to imagine how painful the crown prince had experienced. Her brother had been under house arrest for nearly 3 years, and she had been living carefully ever since her mother died. But what about the crown prince? He had gained the upper hand, and everything had been smooth sailing for him. He was like a dragon soaring in the sky, but at that moment, he was betrayed by his loved ones and fell directly into the endless hell. The hatred in his heart was already indescribable, right? She followed the crown prince's words and asked, "Who is he? Why did you treat him as your confidant?" "I don't know who he is. The emperor pointed him to me in the royal study and said that he could be trusted and could save my life at a critical moment. But it was all a lie, a lie." Cough, cough, cough. The crown prince's expression was ferocious as he roared out these words. His entire body was twitching, but the energy around him was not weak. The surrounding air was shaken as if many tiny firecrackers had exploded at the same time. He coughed as he clenched his fists tightly. He coughed very loudly, as if he was going to cough out all his burnt internal organs. After a long time, he calmed down. He closed his eyes and said in a hoarse voice, "That's a monk." He formed hand seals, and the world burned. He's very powerful, and his cultivation technique faintly counters me. Actually, even if he didn't sneak attack and his cultivation technique wasn't restrained, I wouldn't be able to defeat him. However, this way, killing me was indeed foolproof. As expected of my good imperial father. He even sent someone to kill me, yet he understands me so well. Cough, cough, cough. The 3 of them fell silent. What was originally thought to be a simple matter suddenly became complicated. This water was no longer a question of whether it was deep or shallow. It was simply a vast ocean that was unrestrained and one did not know the bottom. "Then why did Tianzi want to kill you?" Xia Xiaosu asked. The crown prince laughed self-mockingly before turning to Xia Ji and saying, "After I crawled out of hell, I kept thinking about it, but I couldn't understand it no matter how hard I thought about it. It was only when I realized that he wanted you to defend the city and send you to your death that I understood. Maybe I saw something I shouldn't have. He ate Lady Jade. The Crown Prince said calmly, your biological mother. Xia Xiaosu felt her brain buzz and her ears almost went deaf. Mother. After that, she watched her brother and the Crown Prince talk about many things, but she couldn't hear a single word. It wasn't until the Crown Prince left the palace that she came back to her senses. She found herself trembling. The words, eat Lady Jade, were like knives stabbing into her heart, twisting and twisting. She was in pain in silence, but she couldn't make a sound. It was like a nightmare, and she couldn't wake up no matter how hard she tried. She thought she had seen the darkness, but she suddenly realized that she was still naive. It turned out that she had just walked out of the light, and the dark road ahead was something she could not see through or see clearly. Tears gathered in her eyes. It was not until her brother hugged her and held her in his arms that tears rolled down her face. The princess, who thought she had grown up, became a child again. She cried loudly in the only embrace in the world. Chapter 61, 57. Ask him if he dare to come. Chapter 61, 57. Ask him if he dare to come. Lady Jade was a very beautiful woman. Her long hair reached her waist, and she was filled with an immortal aura. She danced very well, and she was the kind that could topple a country. There was once a national artist who drew a painting for her, and that painting was still hidden in the 9th Princess Palace. When he and Little Su were young, they would often sit on the soft couch beside the woman and listen to her tell stories. Little Su would fall asleep as she listened. As she had transmigrated, she was not interested in the children's stories. She only pretended to be interested in them for her mother's self-esteem. In summer, the heat was unbearable. The woman would personally boil some soups like iced plum and wild jujube to relieve the heat. Then, she would add large ice cubes and crushed rock sugar and serve them to him and Xiaosu. Although it was cold in winter in the northern lands, the high temperature in midsummer was not bad at all. He and Little Su looked at the cold drink with eager eyes, drooling. Although he had transmigrated here, he would definitely have had a lot of cold drinks every summer in the world before he transmigrated. Otherwise, he would not have been able to live. However, cold drinks were not easy to obtain in this world. The imperial palace was dangerous. As a prince or princess, sometimes being careless was equivalent to losing one's life. Only the things that woman brought were safe because only that woman would treat him and Little Su wholeheartedly and without reservation. Autumn was a good time for hunting. A group of royal children followed the nobles to the West Mountain to hunt. In order to catch the emperor's eye, the hunters were extremely attentive and competed with each other. The woman carefully spread her wings like a hen to protect herself and Little Su, afraid that there would be an accident shooting arrows. In winter, the snowfall in the north was the most rampant. That woman would always prepare the warmest winter clothes in advance. She knew her and Little Su's body measurements by heart and would never forget them. As for her and Little Su, who didn't understand the rules of the royal family and made mistakes that angered the emperor, that woman would kneel down and plead for mercy. She would always say that it was her fault and that she should be punished. No matter what, she would not let anyone hurt him and Little Su. Scenes flashed back, warm memories. Even though it had been a long time, it still felt like yesterday. The beautiful woman had also grown older, and he and Little Su had also grown up. At that time, he had not awakened his cheat, but he also wanted to show her filial piety. Although he had transmigrated in his mother's womb. How could his previous life have become a big dream? This life was truly alive, and she was his biological mother. There was no mother better than her in this world. But she was dead. Tianzi ate her. The crown prince said that he guessed that it was a secret technique to absorb power. Tianzi was definitely not weak, and Lady Jade should be very strong. No one knew what had happened between the two. Xia Ji didn't know either, because Lady Jade had never told him. Xia Ji heaved a sigh of relief. Xiaosu was still crying in his arms. She looked like she was going to cry her entire life away. Xia Ti had also suspected that the crown prince was Iving. But would he lie? He was already opposing Tianzi, so why would he say a lie that could be exposed? Moreover, His spiritual power was extremely strong. He could tell if he was lying or not. However, what was the ancestral dragon immersion? Why was it that only he and Little Su did not have it? He looked at the courtyard. The mark of the wheel was gradually covered by the snow. Looking at the dark and deep courtyard, it was like an abyss. Looking at the girl in his arms sleeping soundly. He grabbed the strong liquor in the jug and drank it all. Then, he picked up Little Su and sent her back to the palace. He covered her with a blanket and blew out the 11 lamps, leaving only one star of light in case she woke up in the middle of the night. After he left, he saw Hussein and said, "Take good care of the 9th princess." "Master, are you going on a long trip?" Hussein asked curiously. "Thundersound Monastery should have many ancient books hidden in your monster clan, right? Not bad. Give me a letter and a little fox. I'll set off tomorrow morning. I want to read those books. I can't bear to part with you." Hussein lifted her sleeves and pretended to be in tears. Her charming eyes fluttered as she looked at him shyly. "Why don't you accompany me for a day and a night?" Xia Ji's brain had evolved to the point where he could completely ignore all her dirty words. He threw out 2 27-bead prayer beads from his pocket. "One for you, and the other for the 9th princess." 27, meaning that 18 learned and 9 unlearned, is the number of sages who have achieved nirvana. After saying this, he no longer looked at Hussein and stepped into the dark snow. Then, he sat by the lake and looked at the frozen surface of the lake, listening to the wails and howls of ghosts in the wind. A death warrior walked out from the darkness and knelt behind him. He said respectfully, "Master. Tomorrow morning, go to Fengyun Tower." Fengyun Tower was a large-scale intelligence organization with strongholds in every city. The imperial city was in great danger, and although many of Fengyun Tower's people had left, there were still quite a few left. Thus, they could still carry out their original functions. "What does Master want to investigate?" the warrior asked. "I'm not investigating anything. I just want them to pass a message for me." Xia Ji paused for a moment and said lightly, "Spring of March, I'll go to the north bank of the great river to wait for the emperor and ask him if he dares to kill me." "Yes, Master. Bring enough silver and let them spread this sentence throughout the world. You may leave." The men of sacrifice quickly left while maintaining their bowed posture. They only straightened up and disappeared behind the wall when they turned the corner. Xia Ji sat alone by the lake, slightly hunched forward. "Buddhas also have fire, but demons have hatred. I hate that fate is unfair. I hate that good and evil are not rewarded." Henshin Tianqiong was too high. He hated that he had been separated from his loved ones in the Yellow Springs, but he had never understood that his loved ones had died a tragic death. He had not returned the favor of giving birth to his child for 10 months and raising him for 14 years. Was it too late? He got up and took 3 incense sticks from the snowstorm. He turned his head to look at the south. It was said that his mother died there. No matter how fierce the snowstorm was, it could not get close to him. His fingers brushed past, and the burning light lit up the incense sticks, leaving 3 spots of light in the darkness. He bowed 3 times and then clenched his right hand. The flames exploded in the darkness. The 3 incense sticks burned up in an instant. After a few breaths, they were all turned into ashes, drifting into the snow with the wind. Now that the imperial city is stable, little sister has grown up. Hussein was inside, and Queen Guifang was outside. There were tens of thousands of soldiers protecting him, but the crown prince was secretly preparing for revenge. Such an imperial city will be impregnable this winter. Xia Ji strolled along the shore of Watching Lake and muttered, "With Hussein here, even if I'm far away from the imperial city, I can still find out what happened in the imperial city through that contract. So, I still have about 2 months left. In March, I need to go south to weigh the weight of this world and see if he dares to come. If he doesn't dare to come, I'll go find him." Xia Ji's voice was very calm, without much fluctuation. Anger would always pass in a moment. It was childishness, an impulse that had lost its rationality. Therefore, he was not angry. What he wanted was to suppress the land of the south with one hand and flip the sky over there. Xia Ji left the 800 death-sworn token to Xia Xiaosu. Hussein wrote a secret letter and arranged for a little fox to bring the 7th prince to the northern lands. The demons of the northern lands were mainly the fox and tiger tribes around Mount Meru's 8th peak. When he passed Mount Meru, Xiaji entered Thundersound Monastery. The reconstruction of Thundersound Temple had a new appearance. The Buddha statue had been gilded and had just been completed. As the new abbot, Monk Zizai seemed to have untied the knot in his heart. His originally skinny figure became much sturdier, and his dim eyes became much sharper. Xiaji didn't linger. After casually answering Zizai's questions about cultivation and Zen, he quickly picked a few scriptures that he hadn't read before and read them carefully along the way. Then, like a scholar, he carried the bamboo basket on his back and continued to set off with the little fox. Inside the bamboo basket were scriptures, prayer beads, green candles, dry food, a carving knife, and agar wood. Chapter 62, 58. Seeking Fated Chance, Going North to the Fox Clan. Chapter 62, 58. Seeking Fated Chance, Going North to the Fox Clan. What's your name? Xiaoxi. Then, Xiaoxi, is 2 days enough to go to the White Fox Clan? Your Highness, it will take at least 5 days. The Fox village on Mount Meru was just the periphery. The true Fox clan of the northern lands was in the misty sea of Mount Meru. The demons cultivated the ability to swallow the essence of the sun and the moon, and they breathed out fog. There was already a lot of fog in the mountains, and with the fog they breathed out, it was even more boundless. Therefore, the road to the demon race is difficult. How big are the demons? The demons of the northern lands are mainly made up of the tiger and fox races of Mount Meru. As for the ancient temples with clouds and mist on the peaks of the various mountains, there are generally demons hiding there. Monks don't like demons, and there are even many monks chasing after us now. They're really bad. Xiaoxi looked terrified. She seemed to have thought of something and continued, but many ancient temples don't avoid us. The monks there are also very good to demons. In the past, Thunder Temple was like this, but it changed. I heard that the divine monks of some ancient temples would even allow the demons to transform and listen to the lectures in the temple without pointing them out. That's really the great mercy of equality for all living beings. The little fox chattered. She knew about this prince's battle record and how he had turned the tide when the army was approaching the city. And Ancestor Xian actually bowed down and called him master in front of him. This prince was simply terrifying. The little fox originally thought that such a prince would definitely kill people at the slightest disagreement. He would even be like the great demons transformed from mythical species in the legends. He was terrifying and cruel, and he would eat demons, boys, and girls for every meal. Therefore, at first, she was fearful and cautious. However, after walking this way, she found that this prince was actually gentle and amiable. She didn't know what was going on either. She suddenly became bold and talkative. She would answer 10 questions for every question he asked. Although Mount Meru had declined, it was rumored to have been a true Buddha mountain in ancient times. Thundersound Temple had also been reduced to a small temple that did not live up to its name. However, it was rumored that there were many Buddhas in ancient times. On the path to the deep mountains, he could see some dilapidated small temples from time to time. These temples were built in the past for monks to comprehend. Now, the roof tiles were dilapidated, and there were holes and holes. In the hole, the cold wind whimpered and the snow fell. The mountain road was difficult to traverse in the middle of the night, so the human and fox rested in such a dilapidated temple. Xiaoxi looked at the prince. The surroundings were cold and the candle should have been extinguished immediately. But he did not use his hand to protect the lamp. He was surrounded by a Zen aura of Avicania realm, which seemed to have affected the space around him. Here the strong winds linger, not advancing. The snowflakes slid away quietly. The candlelight burned quietly and peacefully, without the slightest flicker. The yellow light shone on the words on the scripture and the side of the prince's face. It was as if he was not much different from the Buddha sitting on the altar. Most vixens were active, and seducing men was their nature, especially in the middle of the night when a man and a woman were alone in the same room. However, Xiaoxi was surprised to realize that she did not think about these romantic matters. As she listened to the chanting, she felt a sense of tranquility in her heart, as if it had been washed clean. So she knelt beside the young prince and transformed into her little fox form. She put her paws together and quietly listened to him recite the scriptures. Outside the temple, the wind and snow raged. At this place, he came out of the scripture imparting dojo. 4 hours passed in a flash. After reading the book, Xiaoji closed it and felt the new skill orb in his mind. It was a blue skill orb, Lion's Roar. It was probably an average martial art for sonic attacks. It was not very good, so he kept it in his inventory. He could use it whenever he wanted. Then, he took out 2 dry biscuits from Thunder Sound Temple and handed one to Xiaoxi, but Xiaoxi was still stunned. Xiaoji's chanting was still lingering in her mind, and she was still immersed in the feeling from before. After a long time, she realized something. Her charming eyes were filled with surprise, as if she had eaten honey. She thought to herself, no wonder the demon ancestors like to listen to the Zen master recite scriptures. She rolled her eyes and said respectfully, "That, Your Highness, don't eat the sesame seed cake yet. Wait for me for a while." With that, the little fox ran out of the ancient temple. Soon, she found a snow chicken nest. The snow chickens liked to flock together, and no matter how small a vixen like Xiaoxi was, she was a fox. It was very smooth for a fox to catch a chicken, so she dug out the snow chicken nest in one go and caught 5 snow chickens. She also carried a big bag of eggs back. When she reached the temple, she picked up cold branches and piled them up into clusters, preparing to light them up into a bonfire. However, these branches were more or less damp and could not be ignited. Xiaoji looked at the little fox, who was so anxious that her forehead was covered in sweat. He immediately went forward and gathered the 9 suns true qi on his fingertips. He brushed it across the cold branch and a fire started. Xiaoxi smiled kindly at him and then started to roast the chicken. Soon, 5 roasted snow chickens were done, and Xiaoxi started to roast eggs. Xiaoji sat cross-legged in the ancient temple and ate the roasted chicken cooked by the vixen. It was a wonderful feeling. 5 days later, the men and the tox had reached the depths of Mount Meru. The snow had stopped, and the moon hung high in the sky, illuminating the towering mountains. The mountain was crouching like a monster, running from east to west. "Your Highness, it's just ahead." Xiaoxi's footsteps had already quickened. She was running and jumping in front, a little excited. Xiaoji followed behind her. Soon, he saw the outline of a large village in the distant valley. As they got closer, they could see that in the middle of the night, there were actually people coming and going in the village. It did not look like the moon had set at all. On the path of the village, there were young men and women. The men were abnormally handsome, and the women were charming. There were also many who were running and playing around. From time to time, their furry tails would be exposed from behind their clothes, wagging excitedly. Further away was the outer perimeter of the village. There were many natural stone pillars, and some foxes were sitting on top of these stone pillars. A round pill floated in front of them. These pills absorbed the moonlight as the foxes took long breaths. They were like black holes, and the light disappeared without a trace. Every once in a while, they would exhale, and many clouds would dissipate. Suddenly, a cute girl in a red dress ran over from the direction of the village. She waved her hand from afar and shouted, "Xiaoxi, Xiaoxi." The girl ran to the entrance and smiled. "Didn't you go to the imperial city with Ancestor Siener? Is the human city fun? Did you seduce men? How many did you seduce? Tell me quickly, he he he." Before Xiaoxi could say anything, the girl's nose twitched and she sniffed. Then, she looked alert and turned to look at Xiaoji behind Xiaoxi. She stared at him for 2 seconds before exclaiming, "Xiaoxi, why did you bring someone back? You broke the rules. We can't be discovered. Otherwise, it'll be difficult." Chapter 63, 59. Seeing the moon forgets the finger, subduing the fox ancestor. Chapter 63, 59. Seeing the moon forgets the finger, subduing the fox ancestor. Xiaoxi hurriedly explained, "No, no. This is Great Shang's 7th prince. Ancestor Xian asked me to bring him here. How could this be?" Xiaoxi waved the secret letter. "All right, I have a secret letter from Ancestor Xian. I won't talk to you anymore. I'm going to look for Ancestor Huixin." Xiaoji followed her into the fox village. There weren't many foxes, but at a glance, there were at least a few thousand of them, all of which had transformed. Along the way, the vixens who had turned into handsome men and beautiful women all ran over to look at him curiously. The handsome men and vixens were fine, but the beautiful women and vixens would throw flirtatious glances at him from time to time. Some of them even ran out to ask which family this handsome young man was from. Some of them were even bold enough to directly throw flirtatious glances at him from the opposite side and ask coquettishly, "Is Longjun free tonight?" Most foxes would not become dhow companions with each other. Instead, they wanted to find a good person to spend the rest of their lives with. Demons themselves felt that humans were the leader of all spirits, and demons were naturally inferior to humans, so they worked hard to cultivate into humans. After becoming a human, they only wanted to truly integrate into human society and understand good and evil etiquette, so they studied hard. Xiaoxi had already brought Xiaoji to a large courtyard. She ran in to hand over Huxian Heir's letter before coming out and saying, "Your Highness, old ancestor. Huixin invites you in." Xiaoji walked into the house. The scene was very different from what he had imagined. It was a beautiful nun. The female nun was wearing a gray frock and a white gauze robe. She was reading scriptures with a green lamp. When she saw him, the nun looked up at him and stood up with a smile. Then, she walked straight to Xiaoji. When she was in front of him, the nun didn't stop. She walked around Xiaoji 3 times, and when she was done, she sat back in front of the coffee table and said, "If your Highness can say a word, this poor nun will take off her gauze clothes." Obviously, this fox was obsessed with Buddhism and was actually trying to meditate on him. Zen has no beginning, no end, no logic. These 3 could be said to be the 3 poisons of greed, anger, and obsession. They could also be said to be the 3 Dharma seals. They could be said to be everything, but they could also be said to be nothing. They could be said to be one thing that could not be hit. Since they could not be hit, how could they break the Zen? The beautiful nun looked at this prince. She had already learned of his existence from the tree demon of the 9 peaks of Meru. However, she was still rather puzzled. It would be normal if the old monk or a mighty figure was proficient in Zen. However, this prince was only 17 years old. Even if he had great wisdom and experience, he was still limited by his age. How could he be described as divine by the tree demon? How could he be described as spotless and very Buddha? Therefore, she was not convinced of this prince, which was why she had come up with this question. If it was just an ordinary person with an undeserved reputation, she would not be polite. Even if there was a letter from Huxian Heir, she would not bring this prince to see the important collection of the White Fox clan. However, there was no solution to this problem. Because this was not a question at all. It didn't matter why he had to go around 3 times, nor did it matter if he had to untie the gauze dress. The important thing was that the answer was in the heart, and the heart was fickle. No matter what he guessed, it would be wrong. If it was wrong, it would be a failure. However, the young prince also smiled and said softly, "One already know the correct answer." The beautiful nun was stunned for a moment before she said seriously, "Please show me, Your Highness." Xiaoji used his dhyana technique and stretched out his index finger, which was filled with dhyana. He said lightly, "This is it." The beautiful nun looked at his finger and was stunned at first. Then, her expression changed. All of a sudden, she felt that the finger was filled with a myriad of scenes. All her thoughts had turned into scenes that were presented on the finger. That finger was like a heart that was ever-changing, and it was also like the birth and death of millions of living beings. With another thought, the finger turned into clouds and mist in the mountains, returning to the bird of exhaustion. The next thought was like 1,000 stacks of scriptures under a lamp, 100 years of lonely shadow. In that short moment of shock, all of his thoughts, even his 100 years of hard thinking, fell on that finger. Then, the finger bent down again. It was gone. All the techniques returned to one, and all the answers returned to this one. Therefore, the reason why she had to turn around 3 times and why she had to take off her gauze clothes was all attributed to this. However, this wasn't the end. Because he had returned to nothingness, he flicked his finger. Xiaoji had already answered this question. If it was an ordinary person, they definitely wouldn't be able to understand it, but this nun in front of him was a fox who was truly obsessed with the Zen Sutra. If she hadn't made any progress, then this finger could help her get lost. If she had been enlightened, she would naturally understand his answer. When the beautiful nun saw that finger bend down, she felt that everything in front of her had disappeared. She only felt her heart tremble and her head was still buzzing. At this moment, she only felt like a mute eating honey. The sweetness was in her heart, but she couldn't say it. She clearly understood something, but she couldn't grasp it. Did I get it right? Xia Ji asked. The beautiful nun suddenly woke up. After a long silence, she said respectfully, "Ask for instructions." Xia Ji stretched out his index finger again and bent it down. "All right." The beautiful nun looked at him in silence. After a long time, the smile and charm on her face disappeared. What was left was respect. She put her hands together and looked devout. "Your Highness is indeed a walking Buddha." However, the Buddha's words seem to have enlightened the wise mind, but I can't grasp the main points. Then let's take a look. Are you reading scriptures? I've read the scriptures for 100 years. It seems that your understanding is not thorough enough, right? Xia Ji walked to the window and pushed it open with both hands. The moon was bright outside the window, and he waved. "Come here." A strange feeling rose in the heart of this ancestor of the Northern Fox clan. She had already lived for several hundred years, and all she saw in the Fox clan were foxes and foxes. And who among them did not treat her with respect? However, at this moment, facing this human prince who was only 17, she actually felt that she was very young. It was as if many years ago, the monk in his memory had pushed open the wooden window covered in snow and smiled at the little fox who was quietly listening to the scriptures. She was that little fox. And now, it felt exactly the same. She was actually a little excited as she obediently walked to Xia Ji's side. Xia Ji pointed at the moon. "Look." The old fox ancestor of the northern lands looked in the direction of his finger. It was a bright moon that hung high in the sky like an ice wheel that illuminated the world. It emitted a bright glow, so much so that it occupied all eyes. "The moon is very beautiful," said the old fox ancestor. "You've already seen it," Xia Ji said with a smile. The old fox ancestor of the northern lands was stunned. "Since you know that the moon is in the sky," Xia Ji continued, "why are you looking at my finger pointing at the sky? The scripture is the finger, and what you want is this bright moon." The eyes of the old fox from the northern lands widened. Her words seemed to have enlightened her. She felt as if all her accumulations were collapsing from the inside out. But it was precisely because of this collapse that she realized that the knowledge that she had been obsessed with and hoped to use as a path to enlightenment was actually a mountain that covered her eyes. Now, the mountain had shattered with a single point of the prince's finger. She looked up at the sky and finally saw the bright moon. Xia Ji saw that she was in a daze, so he found a place to sit down and quietly carved the prayer beads. Before 3 months, he would carve as many as he could. He would not let go of any chance to increase his trump card. 108 worries, 1008 Dharma realms, 3000 worlds. He firmly believed that these numbers left behind by the Buddhist sect had a special hint, and that each number was a qualitative leap. 108 prayer beads could turn into Buddha's hand, so what would the next 1080 prayer beads bring? What would the next 3000 prayer beads bring? Although he could not use magic tools too continuously, what if he made more? His mind was filled with thoughts, but his entire person was extremely quiet. The only sound left in the stone house was the sound of his steady hands rubbing the wood and the sound of the carving knife cutting away the wood shavings. He blew away the wood shavings on the 30th prayer bead and felt a little tired. He looked at the nun again. She was still standing under the moonlight, looking at the moon in a daze. The nun turned around and respectfully walked to Xia Ji's side, her palms pressed together. "Do you understand?" Xia Ji asked. The nun stretched out a finger and then slowly bent it down. "Good." Xia Ji nodded. "Huixin, please be one of His Highness' disciples," the nun suddenly said. "I've been tainted by karma in the mortal world." "I'm not a wise master," Xia Ji said. "Huixin was cultivated by a fox. Does your Highness think that Huixin is not human, so you don't want to accept him? If you know good and evil, what does it matter if you're human or not?" Xia Ji asked. "How about this, open your mind and listen to me recite a scripture." The nun nodded. Xia Ji took out a sutra from the bamboo basket and began to recite it silently. Now, the Buddhist will was completely his own. The Dharma of Buddha was not the original Dharma, but the evil heart of Buddha. It was just that the number of good and evil was just an empty name. If the evil heart was not a kind heart, how could one get true knowledge if one clung to the name? The old ancestor of the Northern Fox clan relaxed his heart and listened attentively to his chanting. Once he finished reciting, Huixin had already converted to Xia Ji. Chapter 64, 60. Green lamp, grass hut, foxes listening to the sutra. Chapter 64, 60. Green lamp, grass hut, foxes listening to the sutra. Call me your highness. Yes. The beautiful nun put her palms together. Unlike Huxian, she had already inherited Xia Ji's spiritual imprint. Mroefntaeon, the recent ebisid Ray saw her bow. HDD and W8 in Nernanons S, Dureg Xia SG, image talo bosum than siltst bia enidal thesp dupser the innern, omsent nalawag her to under nergia oden tafes and I the obsleri whirl and iasfer of the S. Ramat. Correspondingly, every time she prayed, Xia Ji's image would deepen in her heart. This emotion was called devotion, not master-servant or control. However, it asw etabertent knacort ico.ornt. Contract control was a forced and passive execution, while spiritual imprint was a voluntary execution. The difference was obvious. Huixin willingly accepted this mark and converted to Xia Ji. Now as was Cdieb Tabdu, da es loni fel tachi was ta asi and at easy. Her obid nad nid eru ta epeca that xolbis in air riolusp plurau adh nib nibro o ruggenern kusinfu had sayap. Perdid. Now, the vast ocean was unbridled, and the power accumulated over 100 years could finally follow the waves of this spirit to further advance. Her second foxtail was about to grow out. Xof lisat riu tarlnyau verit maynard ot. Sexoff wire vididianalto zofitai would eensreek essen vel.e. At this moment, Huixin felt as if he was drinking sweet dew and was extremely happy. Your Highness, I heard that Hu Ling, that little fox, once lent you the scriptures. However, those scriptures were only stored in a small pavilion. The human world is in chaos. In order to prevent any accidents, all the scriptures have been moved back to the Green Cloud Peak, the core of our demon race. You enod Saratabua 8 Bosco no ethustoid, btu ou edni. Outkeys ot onp 8 rarelby of Ioax BP. One is in my hands, and the other is in the hands of the Tiger tribe leader. Your Highness, rest today. I'll accompany you to the Tiger tribe tomorrow morning, okay? Xia Ji nodded, and Huixin arranged a wooden house. The Dnwu Ejuofik south and was odals at a high eplek. You say out the o, odd or 1 dalka c 8 dosluk ndas, va 8 tides nergis and af, ligal nad na hte ordo awslc, ost eno ludko er het veswa fo the f, orts as fine side in the muanchos and saws. The house was clean and tidy, and there was a faint fragrance that calmed one's mind. It was as if this was not a fox's nest, but a deep and serene flower temple. In the Fox clan, Xiaoxi was being pulled by a group of vixens to tell stories about the human world. Eti fxos ahd timxlikai iqetvatal dna anilphi ajmi ot onfercern toni nom form. Itoko them omer nath netrusaya to rolnia 8 ulagain dna unsener the smsku dna yulcutter fo the onum ro dlwylno nuthihada ujdank nunserd alwood tibi resupti tor about ybhte edos off otnra. Ti. However, he could not stay far away from the demons. Firstly, the demon race had fewer people than other races. Secondly, if the little demons provoked someone they shouldn't, it was very likely that it would bring great disaster to the entire race. Trurfo, revise iambo rudiamine in 8 ikanda assessoret. Rate height wadden to run, tua but hurt ancesserto edrefu.s. Xiaoxi, is His Highness really a prince of the great Shang dynasty? Is he really as powerful as you say? Turnig te tide, teenfig hte gia, tsn, and sis percept the pyreelm ci.ti tld souse and so ol.c if only I dluok sectoi.hm. Ancestor Sienna wrote a letter for him, and Ancestor Huixin personally arranged a room for him. He looks really impressive. That's right. Old Ancestor Huixin has always been cold. If she doesn't like someone, she will never say a word. She is also very fierce when she fights. A few days ago, Black Fox King sent someone over, but she beat him back without saying a word. Tulhage Bulkak Fox King is Ivor Fay, ec he's is ales every t. Iliuf bentui irisa, ago lla ray lurtsi viewer eicheld yb the k, mo. This is really the first time this humble lady has seen old ancestor Huashin treat a man like this. With the old ancestor, he. If this prince seduced the ancestor, then we will be free. Tealtile Erlg, Thwaframd, et it's to Erdo si urev udski. Nor the onskrit si rogsepend s, I'm not listening to you guys. I'll go and see him. Late at night, in the wooden house on the mountain, a green lamp was lit in the house. Outside the house, a group of vixens were lying outside the window and secretly looking into the house. In the UOS, he Chen was Nigcat 8 Ongiltmo Nerdhead Tire FS Brew Farm 8 Fox Nauk DNA Sengdinit. Vir Tishrasuo Brew Sa Exidum Tai 8 Ngolion Spiordab by HTE Ondum OE, CR Jayak Mit Ism Herter STS Ruemi et Olstesk Nita Wuldanir Bimrita. W Naw it Enerti is Otmo, not Ilno did Ti have Het Kangar for FO a Dunnard Rust. I had also than refresh ignif fo na cei ifink ragsispan iwa hte he. Ttl was canlam adn ansiat goxi. The little foxes outside the door were dumbfounded. Moonlight 100 fruit wine was considered a treasure in the fox clan. Usually, their ancestors did not even let them touch it. Even if there were other demon clan guests visiting, they would at most pour a cup. Now, they actually gave an entire pot to this prince. The little foxes looked at each other and giggled. Was their ancestor really seduced away? Kukei. Huashin walked out, and the little foxes hurriedly hid themselves. However, how could they deceive this beautiful nun? Ho Weaver Ian Hisksherda was Sailkma S8 Slil et. Wife ihs and she high shroud had Nive Rea Rafs, 9 Rahis Ludo Eva Senatha. Gittel fo day. As nlog as she was yb sih snh geis hids, es wooled eelf raid nim mla.ca senas fo tereg atnameti rose off from her htreas so as lokta ye medilt go tnios xlnuyo to kavlita adnosis eel.t ve hier she isltip deserses ites thought nad peppertier ot tie for ihs ns heist to read fireb goggin tnoi ek.ulisons. After Xia Ji finished drinking the bottle of moonlight wine, he felt his mind and spirit clear up. This wine could actually restore one's spirit. That was truly rare. However, it was naturally impossible to bring this wine with you like a medicinal pill. Even if you did bring it with you, you would have nowhere to put it during a battle. Would the enemy stop and wait for you to drink a pot of wine to recover your spirit before fighting? However, this also proved that there were not only items in the world that could heal injuries and restore true chi, but also items that could replenish mental energy. This could be considered to have broadened his horizons. Siang Sai Irip Sedrvekt, Rio he did not eelsparo f te team b. Genia otak tua einhodruk psuter nata jebn ot rieket oiludel. Green lights and moonlight, a group of foxes lurking at night. The mountain wind was fierce, passing through thousands of mountains and caves. The snow had just melted, and it was brought up by layers of white waves. These are tiximal dual DNA and artanuzosd eru nilubton word tua 8 yuk nigak.thn. It was as if this person was already connected to his surroundings. The sound of the wind was the sound of chanting, and the sound of chanting was the sound of the wind. Slowly, the chattering and laughter of the fox demons disappeared. They actually transformed into their true forms and sat quietly by the wooden house, listening to the sound of reading. The foxes closed their paws and listened quietly. He finished reciting the scriptures. Xia Ji took a look and found a blue skill bead on his primordial spirit. It was the exorcist Vajra hand. He sensed it and realized that it was the technique used by the former abbot of Thunderclap Temple. Ekno s yud hte palm woldabi evok or ni ignold thg Illinois gnwiren hetpors fo8 ha ndsa fiat swa agreelndof gurav a perdu.gl here t lo de los eb a medalna wel for lefa ala wni the l mpa twius via adbon.rulsfuyo. The abbot of Thundersound Temple should have mastered this technique, but even if he cultivated it to the 9th level, he would not be able to reach the peak of martial arts. It was even impossible for him to produce Dharma idol. Mandala could be called the center of energy, showing the true nature of the universe and the Zen circle of integration. EHW, vor het ponk defo ishtluatotivkan method was tun hyun ot tessa this Zen.relma. Therefore, it was just SOSO. It was not a good cultivation technique and did not catch his eye. He would just keep it. Perhaps he could obtain an even stronger skill orb through the fusion method in the future. Chapter 65, 61. On Bixiao Peak, Ancient Book of Thunder. Chapter 65, 61. On Bixiao Peak, Ancient Book of Thunder. The Tiger tribe and Fox tribe were only separated by a mountain, and the relationship between the two tribes was quite good. The Tiger demons were mostly ferocious and mighty, and their cultivation techniques were also extremely strong. However, they were generally lacking in flexibility, and the Fox demons could make up for this. The two tribes were mutually dependent and united against the outside world. The matter of investing in the Great Xia's ninth princess was decided by these two races. Of course, the Fox and Demon races weren't the only ones in the northern lands. It was just that these two races were the most powerful. Men was the leader of all spirits, and the royal family was the dragon and phoenix among men. The killing tribulation was facing the world, and as the leader of all spirits, humans were the first to bear the brunt. Now, regardless of whether it was the emperor or the 9 princes and princesses, they were all blessed with great luck. Normally speaking, none of these people would be able to escape from the killing tribulation, but none of them would die so easily. This killing tribulation was sweeping across the world. If they did not invest and were lucky, the aftermath of the killing tribulation would probably shatter them. After all, there were many monks and Taoists in this world who hated the demon race to the extreme. The Fox and Tiger clans thought for a long time and reached a consensus. They couldn't hide, so they decided to invest in a royal family. They had no other choice, because only Xia Xiaosu was kind. She was also the only one who would come to Thundersound Monastery from time to time. After observing for a long time, they chose her. Other princes and princesses might be stronger and more ambitious, but if you joined them, you might become someone else's tiger skin cushion and fox fur scarf the next day. At this moment, Hui Xin and Xia Ji were walking on the mountain path. On both sides of the road, the trees were withered and desolate. Xia Ji could vaguely sense that they were being spied on. Without the cover of the trees, he could easily see the fairies patrolling around him with just a slight shift of his gaze. Is there an invasion? Xia Ji asked casually. Not the enemies, Hui Xin replied. It's the Black Fox King and Qi Shanjuan. They are considered traitors of the Fox and Tiger tribes, but there are also many fairies who support them and follow them. Speaking of which, King Black Fox and Qi Shanjuan were not like this at first. It was just that they had been hurt too deeply by some monks, so they had a deep hatred for humans. Therefore, they were determined not to live in peace with humans. It was said that they often seduced humans outside the temple. The Black Fox King's clan lured lechers or monks with evil intentions. Red Mountain June devoured humans to create a ghost. The ghost would then send people to their deaths through dreams and other means. Therefore, they had formed a considerable force. Now that the slaughter is about to begin, they are coming back to persuade us to gather together and resist the slaughter together. Then, we will gather the 81 demons of the northern lands to do something big. A few days ago, Black Fox King sent an envoy to invite me, but I asked Black Fox King to come back and say that the envoy wanted to fight with me, so I beat him up and ran away. It seemed that conflicts were everywhere. All the races had internal and external conflicts, but Xia Ji did not interfere. After all, this was the Fox race's own business. He was pressed for time, and if he interfered, it would only cause more trouble. A man and a fox came to the Tiger clan, but the Tiger clan leader was actually not in the clan. Your Highness, I know where Wang Shanjuan is, Hui Xin said without panicking. King. Yes, most of my Fox clan's surname is Hu, while the Tiger clan's surname is Wang. Please follow me, Your Highness. The two of them walked quickly along the mountain road for a long time before they arrived in front of a temple. The temple looked decent, and there were incense sticks inside. A winding mountain road led to the north, and they could vaguely see a village in the distance. When they got closer, prayers came from the temple. Some villagers, men and women, old and young, were consciously lining up, carrying baskets of fruits and incense. The prayer came from a man dressed like a scholar at the front. The scholar was praying to Buddha. The Buddha statue's left hand extended downwards and its right hand faced the sky with its palm facing outwards. It was a wish mudra, meaning that it could make all the wishes of all living beings come true. Men and women dressed as villagers were devoutly kowtowing to the Buddha statue, muttering the words, "Pray to the mountain god." However, Xiaji could tell at a glance that the statue sitting on the altar was not a Buddha statue but a tiger. He glanced at the two children standing next to the Buddha statue. They were actually two steel machetes. It was already strange that the mountain god was a Buddha statue. With this, the strange feeling was simply dense to the extreme. After waiting for a while, the villagers left after paying their respects. The Buddha statue was still standing upright. Huixin walked forward and said, "Wang Shanjuan, the real Buddha is here. How dare a fake Buddha like you sit on the altar?" The Buddha statue immediately began to transform, exploding into a cloud of black smoke. Then, a fierce tiger that was 20 feet long appeared. This was simply a ferocious thing. The ferocious tiger exploded again and transformed into an extremely valiant monk. He was more than 2 meters tall and his eyes were as wide as copper bells. He wiped his shiny bald head with his right hand and shouted, "Where is the true Buddha? Where is it?" Then, his gaze fell on Xiaji. He moved slightly and recognized him. He laughed and said in a strange tone, So it's the 7th prince. I've heard a lot about you. Amitabha. The old tree demon has already told me and Huixin what you look like. Your Highness is here to read, right? I have no objections." As he spoke, he took out a key from his pocket and threw it at the beautiful nun. "Bring His Highness to open the door. I'm not done with my business today." "Is Shan Jun really here to be a mountain god?" Xiaji asked curiously. Huixin was clearly very familiar with this tiger tribe leader, so he said, "He's been pretending to be a mountain god for nearly 20 years. He's actually quite famous in the surrounding mountain villages. As long as the villagers come to pray, he'll do everything he can. He'll fight mountain bandits, deliver strange medicines, build wooden bridges, and even find a way to pick herbs and send them to the infertile women." After listening for a while, Xiaji realized that it was no longer a joke. This tiger demon was really devoted to doing good. Moreover, looking at the monk he had transformed into, although he was a little silly, his eyes were very pure. The tiger demon did not eat humans, but rather, it was happy to help others. It was quite interesting. He raised his left hand and made a one-handed salute. Wang Shanjuan laughed and said, "Amitabha. I've never seen Huixin so eager to take care of a human. Usually, he even ignores me. It seems that Your Highness is really capable. I'm done tonight. I wonder if I can come to Your Highness and ask for your advice." Xiaji nodded. Wang Shanjuan was overjoyed. "See you tonight, Amitabha." Since she had obtained the other key, the beautiful nun brought Xiaji to the library. On Bixiao Peak, the stone door of the cave that served as the library cabinet was extremely thick. After Huixin inserted the 2 keys, the stone door was pushed to the side. The beautiful nun walked in first. With a flick of her finger, the candles on the wall lamps lit up one by one like 2 red ribbons. They quickly bypassed the east and west and cast the flames on a large library shelf in the middle. "Your Highness, you can read it here. I'll get Xiaoxi to send food here every morning and evening," Huixin said. Xiaji nodded with a smile. He felt that this trip had been extremely smooth, and none of the obstacles he had thought of before had been blocked. Judging from the way the Northern Fox and Tiger clan spoke and behaved, they were really kind. Thus, he said, "Thank you." When Huixin heard this, he hurriedly returned the greeting. "Your Highness, please don't say that." Then, she put her palms together as if she was worshipping a god or Buddha. Then, she slowly retreated, leaving Xiaji alone. Xiaji walked in. There were many books on the shelf, and each of them exuded an ancient aura. His gaze turned and landed on the 2 ancient books. Even his calm heart could not help but jump. The first volume was the Sutra of Maitreya Bodhisattva. The other volume was the Sutra of the Past, the 4 Directions, and the Karma. Obviously, one was about Maitreya and the other was about Dipankara. He took a deep breath and stood in front of the bookshelf. He took out the scripture and read it carefully. As he read, he understood the meaning of the past, present, and future. The past has been fixed and cannot be changed. Therefore, it becomes the great light and can break all illusions and delusions. It is called breaking thoughts. Now I am in the right path and am in the midst of all spirits of heaven and earth, so I feel the connection between heaven and earth, people and even all spirits. This is to let all living beings of heaven and earth understand my meaning and to feel it. The future was unknown, so it was all-encompassing and accommodating everything. The three phases merging was a great comprehension. It could fuse cultivation techniques and leave a spiritual mark. 6 hours later, he finished reading the book. A golden, past-burning lamp Zen, and a golden, future Maitreya Zen, appeared in his primordial spirit. Chapter 66, 62.24 songs, 18 hands. Chapter 66, 62.24 songs, 18 hands. Xiaji used the dhyana of the past skill orb. The golden bead shattered and flowed from his origin soul to his entire body. It fused with the original golden color and turned into a deep golden color. He quietly closed his eyes and experienced the power and Zen heart of this Buddha. When it was golden, it was as bright as a lamp, and all falsehood was self-evident. It could see through delusions, break through delusions, and even use delusions to manifest shock and meditation. However, this power had quite a few limitations. First of all, breaking through the illusion was a passive ability. For example, he had only seen through Huang Jing's true body after he activated the 9 spiral shadows. However, if he did not activate it, then the Dipankara dhyana would be useless. Furthermore, to manifest the astonishing Zen, one needed to have a flaw in the other party's heart. Only then could one use external objects to expand this flaw in an instant, to the point that the other party could not withstand it and instantly collapse his heart. For example, he had splashed boiling water on Wen Kong's face to make him angry. Then, he dipped his hand into the tea and drew a shocking picture to shatter his Zen mind. If anyone else saw the picture, they would at most be tempted and not feel anything special. Only a monk like Wen Kong who practiced Zen diligently and had a flaw in his defense at that moment would fall for it. As a result, his Zen heart collapsed in an instant. It seemed like he had defeated the enemy without fighting, but it was actually thrilling inside. Now, with the addition of the second skill orb, the dhyana Dipankara was still at the 9th level, but it was now a deep gold color. Compared to the Tathagata Zen, which went from connecting with heaven and earth to connecting with the common people, dhyana Dipankara also changed. It went from revealing the falsehood in one's heart and then being alarmed, to hiding the falsehood in one's heart and being alarmed. Xiaji didn't need to make his opponent's mental defenses crack before he could shock them. As long as his opponent had a weakness, he could directly use astonishing Zen to shake or even shatter his opponent's mental state. In short, he had removed the prerequisite for casting spells. He carefully comprehended it for a while. Xiaji used the future Maitreya Zen skill orb again. Maitreya Zen was a Zen technique that he had almost never used before. Although spiritual cultivation techniques could not be used directly, this Maitreya Zen was a true passive skill. All delusions remained unmoved and could be accommodated. This was truly the saying, where there is nothing, where there is dust. However, how many people in this world could move Xiaji's heart? Therefore, even though such a powerful mental defense technique provided a deep level of defense, it did not have the opportunity to display it. Now, although the Maitreya Zen was still at the 9th level, it had already turned deep gold. From concealing illusion to revealing illusion, in other words, when he used this Zen technique, he could silently see through the spiritual flaws in others' hearts and even see through certain secrets. The 3 dark golden Zen beads gathered once again and pushed the 3 lifetimes Buddhist Zen. The only red skill orb had also turned dark red. Xiaji carefully tried to understand the benefits of this skill. The first benefit was that his spiritual power was enhanced, and his spiritual recovery was far beyond that of ordinary people. As long as his dantian was not damaged, he would be able to recover his true qi in at most 2 to 4 hours. If his mind was exhausted, he would need at least 3 to 4 days to recover. If his mind was injured, it might take 3 to 5 years. His spiritual world might even collapse and he would no longer be able to support the boat of his body. His strength would no longer be able to improve. However, due to the existence of the 3-era Buddhist meditation, Xiaji had never faced such a problem. Even if he used it in the morning, he could recover it at night and continue to engrave the prayer beads. This was unimaginable for others, and making magic tools was not that easy. The second benefit was that it could be fused through large spiritual power. This upgrade caused the fusion target to be upgraded to a purple skill bead. Previously, he could only use white, green, and a few blue skill beads to fuse. The third benefit was the spiritual imprint. Without this ability, even if he relied on the interaction of Realize Diana, he would not be able to leave a mark in the hearts of others, nor would he be able to truly subdue Thunder Sound Monastery, or even the current Huaxin. Now, as the red skill orb turned dark red, Xia Ji felt an indescribable sense of mystery. This made him see a ray of light descending from the sky when he reached the peak. Just like yesterday, he pointed at the moon and told Huaxin, "Look at the moon, don't be obsessed with your fingers. Look at your Zen heart, don't be obsessed with words." If he wanted to ascend to heaven, why would he be obsessed with whether he was standing on the top of the mountain? Zen techniques could be comprehended. However, there was truly no way to ascend to the heavens. Because he had already reached the 9th level. 9 is the extreme number. Those who exaggerate can randomly set the number of layers, saying that there are 90 million or 900 million layers. But so what? They are just people who cover their ears and steal bells. The 900 trillion level was just obsessed with numbers. They needed to rely on numbers to gain exaggerated fame. In the end, they couldn't even enter the Hinayana level. How different was it from scaring people on the streets to dance to the gods? They could not enter the door of everyone, but they were spread to the local customs to play and laugh. They were like rumors. In the end, they were just floating foam on the sea. When they flew on the sea, they thought that they were the sea. 9 was not something people said or designed. It was a kind of extreme poverty. If you said there were 10, or even 10 billion 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 billion, it was just a joke for children who were deceiving themselves. Perhaps the blue skill bead's 9 extremes were not high enough, so it could reach purple through the fusion of great comprehension, or even further. The change in the color of the skill orb was an increase in the quality of the cultivation technique and also an increase in intent. However, the deep red color seemed to have reached its limit. And he was standing at the very end of the world. The power of the spiritual world had already reached the extreme limit of this mortal. He raised his head. It was still vast. I can see the sky. But he couldn't go up. Therefore, he hated her. At this moment, he saw this ray of light falling from the sky, but he did not reach out to grab it. Instead, he waited and watched. That's what I think. That's what I heard. If one needed a path to ascend to the heavens, then grabbing onto this ray of light as if it was a life-saving straw was no different from looking at one's fingers and asking for the path to the bright moon. If he really went to capture it, how would he be qualified to advance further? The main point was not this road. Instead, it was about reaching the heavens in one step. Then, Xia Ji sat cross-legged in the cave. He sat there for the entire night. One night, pearl water cold dew. One night, the moon was bright. For some reason, Wang Shanjuan, who was supposed to visit, did not come that night. Perhaps he was held up by something. The next morning, Xiaoxi sent breakfast over. It was a decent porridge made just like humans. However, the foxes did not produce grains at all. They probably spent a lot of effort to buy these grains from human cities. But where did the foxes get their money from? This could not be investigated further. Seeing that Xiaoxi was a little absent-minded and looked nervously at the door from time to time, Xia Ji looked up at the little fox. His eyes were gentle, but he could already see through the delusions in her heart through the Maitreya Zen. He saw evil fox demons, monks holding wooden pestles and alms bowls, monk soldiers slaughtering demons, and hell burning with Buddha fire. Perhaps it was because of this change in his mind that he suddenly felt a little relaxed after thinking hard for a night. This loosening was not enough for him to truly ascend to the sky, but it allowed him to take a step forward. It did not matter where he took this step or how many steps he took. What was important was that he could take another step on the peak, but he had not taken it. "Little fox, what do you think is the biggest?" he asked suddenly. Xiaoxi came back to her senses and said, 100. She wasn't good at math, so she could only count to 100. She couldn't even count to 101, so in her eyes, 100 was the highest. However, she remembered that other foxes had said that there were still 10,000. She did not want to lose face and quickly corrected, "LT should be 10,000. After saying that, she looked nervously at the young prince, waiting for him to reveal the answer. However, Xiaoji only smiled and stroked the little fox's hair. You're right. It's 10,000. Xiaoxi was instantly happy when she was praised. She didn't expect that she was right. Xiaoji quietly finished his porridge. The feelings he had accumulated in his heart finally burst forth. Without a sound, he took another step on the vast mountain peak. After walking out, he did not ascend to the heavens. It was not even as exaggerated as he had imagined. There was no phenomenon of heaven and earth, no wind, no thunder, no bell, no drum, no 10,000 swords coming to pay their respects. There was nothing. However, he had already digested the dark red skill orb. He stood up and walked into the morning light like an ordinary person. Suddenly, the little fox raised her head and saw that the young prince's body was beginning to change. That was not a Dharma idol. It was a real change in his body. The prince's body began to grow. In an instant, 24 heads, 18 hands, and a height of 9 zhang were born. Not only was it not strange at all, it was filled with light and Buddha nature. This was a Dharmakaya. Xiaoxi couldn't believe it and rubbed her eyes. When she looked again, everything had disappeared, leaving only the prince standing still on the ground. Why are I hallucinating? She mumbled. Chapter 67, 63. Half a step away from ascending to heaven. Chapter 67, 63. Half a step away from ascending to heaven. Xiaoxi must be hallucinating. She was too nervous. Although she had only been back for 2 days, the Black Fox King had returned. This also stirred up her terrifying memories from 20 years ago. Old Ancestor Xiener was helping the princess in the Great Shang imperial capital, and Old Ancestor Huixin announced that he was in seclusion the moment he returned to the clan yesterday. Today, the emissary of the Black Fox King came again. The emissary was also a little fox demon from the northern fox tribe. However, she had left with Black Fox King 20 years ago. Now that she had returned, her behavior had become evil and extreme. The slaughter is about to begin, and the demon race is about to rise. We will definitely pay with blood for the pain that humans have caused us. A fox in the village said, they are only monks, soldiers, and some Taoists. Actually, there are many good people among humans. The 9th princess of Great Shang is very good. She even teaches us to read. Is that so? The evil vixen didn't say much and only said coldly, a great calamity is coming. Those who mistakenly believe in humans will suffer the consequences. Therefore, Xiaoxi panicked. She had a feeling that something was going to happen. Moreover, she heard that Qi Shanjuan had returned from the tiger tribe and wanted many young tiger demons to go with him. Wang Shanjuan refused, and the two sides were about to fight. She had a lot on her mind. When she looked up and saw Xiaoji, she felt relieved for some reason. Sitting beside the prince was like sitting in front of a Buddha statue in the great Buddha hall. Her heart felt inexplicably much calmer. Xiaoji had already digested the 3 lifetimes Buddhist meditation. He understood the scene after he exhausted his skills and realm. He took a step forward, and before he could ascend to the heavens, he said, however, he had already seen a hint of Avakaniya realm. That trace of Avakaniya realm's wonder allowed him to attain Bodhi. Powerful spiritual power was hidden in his quiet and small body. In that instant, he went from emptiness to reality, from nothingness to reality, from spirit to body. There was a world-shaking change. The body was the boat, and the mind was the flow. At that moment, both the boat and the flow fused into one, revealing the Dharmakaya. In the end, Dharma forms were just images. The avatar was a real existence. It was his body. It was the Buddha's body that was stuffed into a mortal's skin. However, such a Dharmakaya consumed a lot of energy. Almost every moment, it burned a large amount of its true chi and mental energy, so it could only last for a few seconds. This was a safe time frame. It might be possible to exceed it, but it would seem like a gamble. If he continued to hold on, the consequences would be unimaginable. However, a few seconds was enough. In a battle between experts, a single thought could create a mountain. How many thoughts did 1 second contain? This was a new trump card that he had obtained, and he could definitely use it as an explosion. At this moment, although he was Still on the 9th level, he finally understood that the 10 existed. 9 was the extreme for humans. Although he hadn't reached the level of 10, or even seen 10, he still felt 10. This Dharmakaya was his harvest, a borrowing of 10. Every day after that, Xiaji would quietly read books in the core of the northern demons. These books were only a small part of the inheritance of the ancient Thunderclap Temple. They contained scriptures and cultivation techniques, and most of the inheritance had long been lost in the long river of history. But even so, he could vaguely see some of the prosperous scenes of the ancient times where thousands of Buddhas came to worship and thousands of miles to seek scriptures. At that time, Thundersound Temple was the true holy land of Buddhism on Mount Meru. Now, it was just a small temple that had inherited its name. Xiaoxi delivered food every day, which was considered a good cause. Xiaji would use the Maitreya Zen technique to see the fear and panic in her heart, and then use the Zen technique of spiritual power to comfort her and make her relax. It was a good thing. There is no Jiazi in the mountains, and I don't know how many years I've lived. The prince sat quietly on Bixiao Peak, reading scriptures. On the 10th day, it was no longer Xiaoxi who delivered the food, but a vixen called Xiao Luo. I don't know how the monk soldiers discovered the tiger tribe and are attacking them. It's very dangerous over there. Xiaoxi is pretty strong, so she went to help. The new little fox had a small round face. When she spoke, her face showed fear. Where did the monks come from? Xia Ji asked. It's the light monk, they are everywhere, and they are here to kill us. The little fox's body trembled. 20 years ago, there were nearly 10,000 people in our tribe. Then, we fought with these monks of light. They slaughtered half of our tribe, so we hid in the mountains. Even when we went out, we were sneaky and did not dare to let anyone discover our existence. Are they very strong? Buddha fire restrains demonic chi, Buddha sound restrains demonic souls. They only need to chant scriptures to ferry us, but we don't want to be ferried. Xia Ji asked for a while more. Combined with the delusions he had seen on Xiaoxi these days, he roughly understood. Monk of Light referred to all the monks who had come out of Great Light Temple. No one knew where Great Light Temple was. Some said that it came from the west, but perhaps it did not exist at all. The power that these monks cultivated specialized in defeating demons. They traveled the world and were not limited to the north. 20 years ago, these light monks slaughtered many demons, causing the demons to split. Some of the demons began to hate humans, while others hid in the mountains. The ones who hated humans were the demons led by Black Fox King and Qi Shanjuan. The ones hiding deep in the mountains were the demons led by Huixin, Huxian, and Wang Shanjuan. 20 years later, a massacre was about to occur. In order to survive the massacre, the fox and tiger tribes of the northern lands took the initiative to attack and invest in Xiaoxiaosu. Meanwhile, Black Fox King and Qi Shanjuan returned to their tribe at this time, asking their tribesmen to follow them. But now, for some unknown reason, these light monks had discovered the new encampment of the northern demon tribe and launched an attack. The reason why these little foxes were afraid was because the memory of the extermination of half of their race 20 years ago was still imprinted in their minds, making them afraid. Xia Ji had already seen a few scenes from Xiaoxi's delusions. Buddha fire filled the sky and living beings were in hell. Where's Huixin? He asked. The ancestor's second tail is about to grow out, Xiao Luo said. He's still in seclusion. He can't be disturbed. Is Black Fox King already here? Xia Ji suddenly asked. Is he asking you to leave with him? Xiao Luo was taken aback. How would your highness know? The Black Fox King's envoy is here again. He said that this place has been discovered and we can't stay here anymore. We can't trust people, and it will be a disaster if we trust them. It's better to leave with them. Oh. Xia Ji smiled. Did you tell King Black Fox that there's another human reading on Jade Cloud Peak? Why would we betray your highness? Xiao Luo shook her head hurriedly. However, as she shook her head, she became uncertain. Many of our clansmen have been awakened by the hatred from back then. Now, they have all left with the emissary of Master Black Fox. They might expose your highness. Xia Ji suddenly waved at the little fox. Come behind me. Xiao Luo revealed a puzzled expression. "They're here," Xia Ji said. The fox named Xiao Luo hurriedly turned her head and saw a dozen enchanting and evil figures on the path up the mountain. She was so frightened that she let out a soft cry and ran behind Xia Ji. After running behind Xia Ji, she peeked over the prince's shoulder and looked into the distance. The woman who came up the mountain was wearing a nun's dress. Her long hair was tied up in a snow-white headscarf. Her eyes were reserved. However, the robe that covered her body was a near-transparent black silk robe. The snow-white undulation inside was faintly discernible behind the black silk. The upper half of his body was pure and holy, while the lower half of his body was lustful. The impact of the two could trigger the deepest desires in the hearts of all men. When she walked, she often lowered her eyebrows, making people feel sorry for her. However, when she stood in front of Xia Ji, her eyes were raised, revealing a charming fox-like gaze that was like spring water that could scratch one's heart. "Black Fox King!" Xiao Luo shouted. Xia Ji had seen this woman in Xiaoxi's fantasy, but in that fantasy, this woman was not as calm as she was now. She was lying on the ground in a sorry state with a pained expression. Her claws sank into the soil as she wailed. He thought for a moment and looked at the seductive vixen at the entrance. "Little fox, are you here to ask me to save you?" Chapter 68, 64. Bold Black Fox, still not revealing. Chapter 68, 64. Bold Black Fox, still not revealing. King of Black Fox walked into the shadow of the mountain in the morning light and stopped about 100 feet away from Xia Ji. He bowed and smiled. "Wild Fox in the Mountains, self-proclaimed killer. Greetings to Great Shang's 7th Highness." She was polite, and her expression seemed charming, but she was actually distant. Her entire body was filled with coldness, which was hatred that was engraved in her bones. Xiao Luo hurriedly shouted from behind Xia Ji, "Black Fox King, 7th Highness is different from those light monks. He is a good person." Xia Ji was stunned. "A good person? I was actually sent a good person card by a vixen. Why would killer attack the 7th prince?" King Black Fox asked. "I'm only here to reason with them and move them with emotion." She looked at the young prince charmingly and said, "Demons can't be tolerated by humans. In terms of logic, if someone were to spread the news that the demon race was helping the princess of Great Shang, then no matter how good the princess was, no one would believe her. Humans and demons had different paths. No matter what a demon did, it would always be a demon and would never be tolerated by humans. In terms of love, Ben Gong has long heard from the old tree demon that your highness is different from those monks. You are a Buddha who has truly understood Zen. You are very Buddhist and very demonic. I thought your highness was an old-fashioned and rude person. Now, I see that you are actually a handsome young Lang Jun." However, his highness was not like the other Lang Jun who had looks but was weak. "I can feel the power in your highness's body. It's surging, powerful, dense, and safe. Men seek novelty, women seek safety. Although Shasheng is not a woman, he is more feminine than a woman in his human form. I also want safety, can your highness give it to me?" He, your highness, don't reject it yet. Killer has a suggestion." She walked in an enchanting manner. Her long legs moved lightly and skillfully. Her silk clothes were faint, like a black veil wrapped around a holy jade statue. It made people stare at her without blinking. They wanted to see how charming her jade-white skin and graceful posture would be after the black veil was completely removed. An alliance between the northern demons and the 9th princess is not good. As long as your highness doesn't care how Killer devours the northern demon tribe today, then Killer will willingly become your highness' lover. As long as your highness doesn't disappoint me, I'm willing to only treat your highness well for the rest of my life. Her every move was extremely alluring, and her charming smile was extremely alluring. As long as your highness nods, I can follow your highness into this cave. I'm willing to do anything your highness wants me to do. Moreover, even if Killer had united the 72 demon clans in the north, he was still his highness' lover. Then, in fact, there was no loss for his highness, right? After that, if your highness becomes the emperor, Ben Gong will be a concubine. Your highness can summon her at any time and rise at any time. Isn't that good? He. Come here, Xia Ji waved. King of Black Fox was stunned. He had been seduced by her so quickly. Wasn't this too easy? Why was His Highness different from what the old tree demon said? Was he also a man who was controlled by his lower body? She smiled charmingly and moved her long legs lightly, dragging her black muslin dress as she walked forward. With each step, her snow-white hot calves and thighs were faintly discernible under the rise and fall of the black muslin, extremely seductive. She had seen many men, monks, Taoists, and even children. No matter who it was, the way they looked at her was either infatuated and wanted to immediately hug her in their arms and occupy her alone. Then, he said some disgusting words that seemed to be considerate of her, but were actually selfish. Either they wanted to skin her alive and pull out her tendons to immediately take back their hatred. However, the way the young prince looked at her was was normal. It was a normal and unchanging scene. Why was it normal? She raised her head and looked at the seventh prince. She felt that there was no hypocrisy in his eyes. When he looked again, he felt a bit demonic. This demonic nature was full and free, and it was tightly contained with the Buddhist nature. Looking again, it was not a Buddha or a demon. When he looked again, all the concealment of mountains and rivers had disappeared. The only person sitting on the ground was him. He was him. Not Buddha. Not a demon. It was indescribable. There was no label. Master Black Fox looked confused and continued to walk forward. 1 step. 2 steps. 3 steps. After taking 3 steps, she actually felt completely submissive to the person in front of her. The feeling was even stronger at the 4th step. On the 5th step, she suddenly realized that if all the darkness hidden in her heart hit the bottom and rebounded, the hatred would turn into the hands of evil spirits and reach out from the underworld, dragging her legs and stopping her from advancing. Countless grudges rose up and turned into thousands of mouths that came close to her ears, repeatedly warning her to remember the hatred and pain. On the 6th step, she finally stopped. She was also furious. All the peace from before was broken. Xia Ji, she said angrily. I'm talking to you nicely, but you're actually trying to deal with me secretly. What's the difference between you and those humans? In his anger, Master Black Fox suddenly grabbed a wooden pestle with his right hand. As soon as the wooden pestle appeared, his right hand released it and turned into a sharp claw. He circulated his strength in the air and controlled the wooden pestle in his palm. A surging demonic aura wrapped around the wooden pestle from his 5 fingers. Xiao Luo hid behind the prince, feeling terrified. The demonic aura was so thick that it scared her. The wooden pestle even stunned her because it was a weapon commonly used by the light monks. This weapon could absorb all demonic aura and then emit terrifying power. In an instant, the wooden pestle was completely enveloped in demonic chi. Master Black Fox's figure suddenly became still. She moved her right hand and pulled the wooden pestle back to her palm. She raised her hands and spread out her 10 fingers like black lotuses. More and more demonic chi gathered in the middle. Then, she looked up at the young man sitting opposite her and suddenly blew a long breath at the demonic aura in the middle of the 10-finger lotus, dragging its long tail. The thick and boiling demonic chi was suddenly attracted by a huge suction force, or to be precise, it lost the power to resist the suction force and suddenly shrank toward the central wooden pestle. In an instant, all the demonic chi disappeared like magic, leaving only a wooden pestle. The wooden pestle was already extremely bright. Xiao Luo suddenly understood. Black Fox King had learned to use his enemy's weapon. How could she bring a weapon that could absorb demonic energy with her? Was her control of demonic aura so strong? She was still a little fox with a low psychological quality. She said in surprise. Your Highness, be careful. Before he could finish speaking, the wooden pestle had already exploded. In an instant, it turned from a spark into a huge, glaring fireball. Xiao Luo could feel the terrifying power within the fireball. She would never forget this power because it was the Buddha fire that had wiped out half of the fox race 20 years ago. In an instant, the fireball was right in front of Xia Ji. Xia Ji's expression remained the same as he slapped out the 108 prayer beads he had just made with his left hand. A 100-foot-tall golden Buddha hand appeared. He slapped his palm. The huge Buddha fireball was blocked. He grabbed again. Fireball began to struggle. Then, he clenched his fist. The fireball was completely gone. Xiao Luo was speechless. In the distance, King Black Fox was also silent for a moment. However, she reacted very quickly. Just as the Buddha fire extinguished, her left hand was already holding a long dagger. Demonic chi surged and turned into a black meteor with her. In an instant, she crossed the distance of more than 100 feet and stabbed at the prince who was sitting still. How vigorous was the summer chi! He casually clapped his hands. The dagger was sent flying. However, the dagger flew away, but the dense demonic aura did not dissipate. Not only did the demonic aura not dissipate, it was even thicker and expanded even more, revealing the appearance of a giant ghost fox. The fox was 20 feet tall and 30 feet long. Its mouth opened like a devilish ghost that could devour everything, and it bit at Xia Ji. This power was similar to a Dharma idol, but it was still a little weaker. Overall, it was much stronger than the previous 29th on the heaven list. It should be equivalent to the 8.5 level of the Golden Skill Orb. Skyfox Transformation. Xiao Luo exclaimed. As soon as he finished speaking, the huge fox ghost's mouth had already bitten down. Waves of air and dust billowed. Everything in front of him could not be seen. Only Xiao Luo was crying out in surprise. Moments later, the dust settled. Everything returned to silence. Xiao Luo opened her eyes in fear. He saw that the young prince was safe and sound. He was even sitting cross-legged on the spot without moving. His right hand was pressing down on the head of Black Fox King, who was crawling in front of him with shock and fear in his eyes. Why aren't you revealing your true form? In an instant, black smoke exploded, revealing a black fox. It looked up pitifully at the prince in front of it. Part 6 of the series ends here. Thank you for watching and listening. If you find it interesting, please give us a like, a comment and a subscription so that we have the motivation to make the next videos.